Vacancy at 0. The numbers by his bed glowed soft as the inside of a cooler. They had broken and been replaced twice over the years, but he always bought the same model with the same pale green face, because change at night is another person in the room. He woke and checked them out of the habit that kept him anchored to what he called, with a wryness nobody but him ever heard, his life. The numbers were easy on the eyes, never too bright unless you stared, which he sometimes did. He stared now. The numbers read 3:30. He blinked to stop them from doubling. They obliged by changing, 3:29. He didn't track the missing minute until 3:28 arrived like a delivered insult, and it was backward. The digits slid down, a smooth subtraction. His body woke and his mind stayed in bed. A kind of cold he associates with leaving the freezer door open slid under his shirt. He reached for the cord and tugged it out of the wall. The plug gave a polite plastic cough. The green face held. 3:27, 3:26, 3:25. Not rushed, not dramatic, just sure of itself. He watched his own hand pause in the air, not quite believing what the light was telling it. He looked for a lie nearby. The watch he bought at the farm store sat on the dresser where he keeps change, because a man needs one surface to betray him less than the others. The second hand moved in a silent, confident sweep, but it moved counter-clockwise, slipping past the marks like he'd laid a track and then decided against it. He stood, and the bed complained in the same 3 notes it always had. Low, high, low. Polite to a man not yet at his full weight. He went to the window that looks over the parking lot and the highway beyond, and the horizon, which is just the line of the big box store's roof when you admit it, glowed wrong. He stands there sometimes in the hour when coops of birds lift as one, and the crimson from the refinery lends the morning a color it doesn't tone. The light did the opposite of rising. The streak that should have been promise dropped behind, and the blue that comes first when day says hello got swallowed, as if sky is a big man taking his words back. His reflection in the glass, which he only attends to when the sun is behind him, held his shape, and didn't. The way a cart with one wheel flat holds groceries you haven't paid for yet. The lines at his eyes faded, then the weary bracket around his mouth that used to irritate him when he met the man he had not planned to be. It wasn't youth. He felt that in the knees, in the thinness of his lips when he pressed them together. It was absence. Something had sanded him and not worried about the finish. His skin went even like a wall just painted. Behind that evenness was nothing he recognized. He touched the glass. It felt like glass. His fingers left ovals that should have fogged the pain. They did not. He backed away, and the nightstand numbers dipped past 19. He unplugged the clock again, as if double is enough for the world to bow. The cord knew the drill and did not resist. 17, 16. He aged backward in the glass and did not become softer. He became plain, as if the hours chewing on his face had been the only story it ever learned. He forced his attention to the carpet because fibers settle into paths, and the paths in a house remember a person. The carpet swore he was real enough to own a rut. The numbers eased into the teens with the small confidence you envy when you are alone. He pinched the bridge of his nose and said a sentence out loud to give the air some work. Okay, Will. Saying his name never helps. It's the only thing that feels worse than someone else saying it, because you hear the small misfit between the word and the person who had to put it on. He stood and made his way through his little apartment over the motel office, the place he called in a tired joke the manager SS Penthouse, and the fridge thanked him with its hum for not opening it while he found the light switch. The switch clicked with its friend, gravity, and the kitchen bulbs stuttered and then learned, the way fluorescents do if you wait them out with a narrowed eye. He watched the stove's cheap clock for a heartbeat. It hadn't the authority to make a statement. It made one anyway, a holding of the previous minute and then a polite drop backward. The coffee maker's tiny red dot went out and came on, apologetic. He didn't own anything fancy. Fancy expects company. The numbers by the bed found 9, and he couldn't tell whether it was him walking or the digits pushing him that returned him to the nightstand. He didn't sit. You don't sit to greet a countdown. You practice your superstition about posture because you still believe in shapes. He had wrapped his hands around the sides of the clock 300 times to straighten it over the years. He wrapped them now to grip something and felt his palms warm the plastic. It should have comforted him. It comforted his hands and left his mouth hanging open in stupid air. There is an appropriate amount of prayer in a moment like this. But he had used up his ration 20-some years ago when he thought the better parts of life might be accessible to a certain number of words said at a proper pitch. He looked at the window like someone would be there with a clipboard to take notes on his last preferences. The window held out a small rhythm of passing tail lights on the highway and the neon vacancy sign that goes to sleep when he says so. The sign was lit though he had turned it off. The letters burned backward. Wakanakav. He saw it, and the word for comfort went through his head for a second, with its skin pulled inside out. He swallowed, thought of his mother making him gulp a lot of water when a word lodged, and laughed because the shape of fear and the shape of embarrassment are half-brothers, and he had plenty of both. When he took the clock into his hands as if weighing it, he expected it to go to 0 with a flourish. It didn't. It found 3 and then 2. Between 2 and 1 there was a pause, a space he had never known to ask for. He put his mouth within it. He didn't have anything ready. That was okay because the pause belonged to the clock, and the clock had never been his friend. A long blink of green nothing. He would have been satisfied to watch the face go black and call that physics, even if it ignored his hand on the cord. The face didn't go black. It changed for him the way a face will when it tries to make you feel soft. It displayed 2 digits he had seen on 7th grade calculators, a little row of dashes like a ladder. Then it found numbers again, only not the numbers you greet where you live. He watched the digits build 1 grain at a time into a time he did not read. He spoke his own name again, in the middle of those numbers, calmly presenting their arrangement as inevitable. It's the only trick we get. He didn't believe himself. He stood there a long time, which meant a short time if the room was a river and the current had reversed. The obvious next thing to do was to open the door and let the hallway light be a better truth. He put his hand on the knob and felt it cool and familiar, and then it slid 1 degree the other way in his grip, as if remembering that the latch had been hung upside down, and then corrected back because handles are polite, even when they reminded of the lies we nail them with. He stepped out into the hall. The vending machine there hummed at a pitch lower than the fridge, which has always been his measure of things. The humming itself sounded like it had a memory, which he hated. His apartment connects to the office with a door that should be locked and isn't, because he is both men when he wakes. The one who lives here and the one who stands behind a counter and watches other men ask for clean towels and mercy in unequal amounts. He pushed into the office and the little lobby that someone else might call a reception area, because it makes misery soften a degree for travelers. The clock above the map of the county he keeps on the wall went backward with a gentle confidence. The phone on the counter did not ring, and also rang. Weird. A little memory of sound you get when you remember a call you didn't pick up. He looked toward the glass doors and the parking lot and saw the vacancies on the reader board had all removed themselves like good employees who knew when to leave the floor. The vacancy sign glowed, reversed, then did something else. Someone had tugged the cord to the sign a tiny bit like it had been caught. It wasn't caught. It had been plugged into the power strip like always, in the born shabby way of he and the motel pretending they were ready. He unplugged it with 2 fingers. The cord gave him the rubber squeak he hated. The sign stayed lit, the letters moving through a fatigue that looked like kindness. The county road that runs past his driveway gave off a different sound as the first trucks pushed night aside. The distant signal on Ridge Street, the one the town installed after 2 incidents they call accidents, because failing to see someone is easier to swallow than failing them, cycled to green for nobody, and he ran his hand over the counter because the grain of the old fake wood is how he knows where he lives. He poured coffee into a mug that wasn't to his, one they keep for guests who use words like pour over suspiciously and then fold their hands to behave, and took a sip. It tasted like coffee gets on lonely mornings. It stood still on his tongue while the room reclocked itself. He heard the ice machine in the alcove behind the office door make the misery crunch. It makes when the bins settle, then undo it, then unmake it again. He thought of the phrase those people like to say on shows where they wear lanyards and speak like they are the last decent voices in a chaos. Time is a flat circle. He disagreed without telling anyone. Time is the kind of animal that stares at itself in a window and can tell if it wants to bark. He ran the motel with the competence you grow when you come up against a problem that makes about as much sense as a man does, and then finds a way to be, if not gracious, consistent. He worked the desk 4 nights a week, sometimes 5 if he could talk himself into the extra, because his mornings had nowhere else to go, and he wanted to get tired at night, the honorable way. The place was called the Driftwood Motor Lodge because it had been built back when the highway used to hold people, along a curl of the river that drags a season's trees past a grassy bend. Nobody knew where the driftwood from the sign had gone. The only wood here is compressed into shapes by a factory, somewhere that prints a grain on top you can finger with a kind of dislike. He lived upstairs because the previous manager finally listened to a daughter and moved south, where the ice knows a different set of rules. Will took the job because it came with a door, and because otherwise he was going to be the man who says he'll see if there is any work left when he knows there one to be. He started the laundry because the sound mattered, because machines earn their keep loud, because tumblers and pumps and compressors make the kind of song nobody takes away from you when they talk about cutting the arts in school. He sorted towels by a habit that belongs to a person who doesn't mind his attention being wasted. The towels had that motel smell of detergent and human effort. The dryer slammed once like a person's truck door when they made up their mind to leave and then didn't he? He tipped in quarters, even though the machine is supposed to run free, because a man has the right to hear certain coins try to carry weight. He listened for the little click he knows tells him the gas has bothered itself. He thought about hot donut Thursdays at a diner called Salt and Sugar, and then remembered it is Tuesday, and the diner doesn't open on time on Tuesdays because the couple that runs it argues in the car about something worth arguing about. He told himself to stop making small stories to cover rooms he hadn't fixed. On the counter by the bell sits the guest book nobody uses because no one wants to write their name down where it could be found. He flips it when he is idle because we like to see ourselves as part of something more than a day. The names have their dates, the shapes of their letters like faces. He sees his own hand, March 7th, a line he wrote when he took over in a flourish that embarrassed him afterward. Gratitude for the opportunity. He slides his thumb along the pages to feel where the indentation of certain pens moved like a car making ruts. Today, the book has fewer pages. It's the same book, but the back end of it is shaved off, like it met a belt sander that didn't to love it. He flips to the middle. The middle is closer to the front now. Names he knew have moved earlier. A woman named Estelle, in a hand that made a person feel there was a plan, now sits 2 days before the night she arrived. He closes the book. He hears his own breath modestly. The first guest to appear that lit backward morning is a man in a brown jacket that fits the way his wife thinks he prefers. He wears his hair like a timeline. He has a face that takes care placing a smile where it won to be asked to write a check. "You got a room?" the man says, And Will nods, as if this conversation hasn't been practiced into permanent grooves. King non-smoking. Ground, if you got it, the man adds, as if he has advanced to this next paragraph of the script after an internship. Will sees his hand reach for the registration card, the thin white rectangles that feel like church fans if you stack them high. He reaches for a pen. The pen behaves. The room exists. He sets it on the counter between them like an admission. The man signs. The pen makes letters slowly, and by the time he's written the last name, the room number on the card has shifted a digit down. He catches the card with a thumb. The card smiles. He writes the number again because writing can be a spell if you're willing to feel foolish. The number holds until the man picks it up. The man looks at it and reads a different number out loud, confidently. 114. Will knows there is no 114 because they pulled the wall between 114 and 116 a few managers back, so they could pretend this would help with families in the opposite direction it ever does. Actually, it's 112, Will says, and the man nods even as his mouth prepares to say that he knows what he knows. He takes the key card like it was the first 70% of a compliment and makes for the hallway. Will watches his back go and watches a second back superimpose itself for one heartbeat, as if a cartoonist had not got the lines right. When the man opens 112, he steps into a room that must belong to a person, because rooms without people attempt to believe in themselves only so long. The door closes softly like an apology. The compressor in the soda machine beside the ice kick starts, and then does not. Will holds the stubby metal lip of the counter and listens to the cafe's radio across the road crackle through a baseball pre-game, the useless certainty of men with microphones who sound like they're sharing a secret no one wants to know. He is fine. He is the kind of fine the day expects. He uses the printer to print a credit card slip because the machine likes paper almost as much as it likes to laugh. The printer spits the slip with a swallow. The timestamp says 0402, then as he watches it becomes 0401 and then 40, or is it 40? He holds it and tells himself we all have to learn to forgive what isn't written down right. He stamps it paid because the stamp is the only fist he gets to use prompt and legitimate. The stamp ink sits glossy, then wicks into the fibers, then rises back, dry. He sets it beside the bell on the counter and looks up to watch the parking lot's 3 cars dissolve a millimeter at a time into something you see in the corner of your eye when you think a thing is moving and it isn't. He looks back at the slip. It says PDIA where paid should be. He stamps it again like someone who forgot the first time was enough. Paid holds now because he is watching. By 9, though 9 is a tentative arrangement that morning, the county texts him. His phone vibrates, 3 short, 1 long, and there is that little tone that phones give off when they want you to feel something mild. The text comes with a banner. Advisory. Power and telecommunications maintenance. The meat of it reads like a man who has learned to make systems gentle. You may experience temporary inconsistencies in device displays and timekeeping. There's nothing to be alarmed about. We will update you as systems are restored. Words like temporary and inconsistencies ring in his head like the sound a glass makes when you run a wet finger around it. The tone is pretty, but you know the trick tires all parties. He screenshots it because he's learning what to keep, then imagines how foolish he would look at lunch at Salt and Sugar sliding his phone across the counter to the woman with the braid to make her check his reality. The maid, who is named Ro, knocks. She has a way of knocking that doesn't embarrass anyone. She uses her knuckles, a neat 3 taps, not too quick, so the person inside has time to decide whether to be in the mood to be seen. On days like today, when she comes for fresh laundry and asks if the machine wants more sass and air, she wears a t-shirt with 3 little stars in the corner because she found it in Lost and Found and decided she had earned a constellation. She pushes into the office and looks at him and at the clock above the map of the county. You see it? she asks, no smile. It's not just me, he says, and the relief feels disloyal. She pulls her lips in like a small rope and then lets them go. No, sir, she says. My boy texted me last night that his stove clock was telling yesterday. Old folks at Maple Ridge, their call pendants don't light right. I stopped by. Mrs. Tips was black. She doesn't move quick. I told her I'd check twice today. Ro has 3 ways to wear her name depending on the mood of the room. Today, she wears it straight, not rolling it when she feels like telling a joke, not tightening it when she wants you to get out of a doorway. He nods, because a man nods when he has been given information with weight. My heart didn't like the mirror, he says, and wishes the sentence looked better in his mouth. Ro looks at him like she is telling him she has seen a man take a seat on steps and put his head down on his knees, hard, then pretend to tie a shoe when he got up. Some folks get extra easy to look at, and that done to feel like it should be, she says. Don't worry with the mirror. It was made to lie for photographs. Just don't let it become the place you go to ask permission. He wants to joke about how he doesn't like being told how to manage tennis shoes at this hour, but the joke would be tired and little, and he has learned to save those for when he feels he can exploit them with friends, which is never. You need quarters, he says instead. Machine fed it, she says. I can ride it from 8 to 11. After that, who knows? Morning feels long when morning is someone else's idea. She pauses and fits her lower lip under a tooth, the way a person holds their place in a book without thinking. Manager man, she says, using the teasing she uses when she wants him to hear her as herself, not as a person the motel pays. If those numbers keep sliding, I'll leave you with upper bank and linen room and go sit with Mrs. Tip after lunch. I don't like her time to be told how to behave without someone with her. Do that, he says. You trust the machine to finish? I trust the machine to disappoint me in the little ways, not this way, she says. I trust myself to ring what needs rung if I have to. At 11, call it a square on the wall clock where the second hand is comfortable, a woman rolls into the lobby with 2 children and a bag big enough to make her turn her shoulder. Her hair says she liked a ponytail when she was older and decided it wasn't a childish thing. The children look equal parts tired and thrilled. They scalp the table's stack of local guide maps before the woman looks down. We have a reservation, she says in the voice of a person who has been promised, and will make someone pay if the promise does not hold because the children have sat enough. What name? Will asks, picking up his pencil like he might need to draw the answer. She gives him a name and he recognizes it, then doesn't. Like a neighbor you can place if one detail will arrive and refuses to. He checks the computer because it's a sacrament, not because it works. The reservation isn't there. The email printed and pinned to the corkboard behind the counter, one he had written yesterday confirmed by writing yesterday across the subject line, isn't there either. The hole where the pushpin was is there. The pushpin sits lower down, not asleep, blank, no paper underneath. We have you, he says as if nothing is wrong, because if you say that sentence in the right tone at the counter of a motel, most people will believe the rest can be handled. He makes her a card with the room number on it and says a phrase he didn't expect to know he would need. If the card decides not to love you, come back and we'll go old style. The woman sighs, a kind of feedback huff a person uses to forgive a world that doesn't deliver its smaller provisions. As long as you're here, she says, glancing at the kids. As long as someone is here. I don't go far, he says. He watches her swipe the lock and the red light and the green, and her face relax the exact amount withheld by the hour in the car. He notes that this time his cheek in the glass of the office door looks like a man who has slept. He looks like a man who has not slept too. The mirror doesn't lie. It says everything and then asks you to pick your favorite. He eats standing up because sitting makes him tired. And he takes his sandwich and lays its paper wrapper on the counter and watches the mayonnaise pull the lettuce down as if gravity doesn't know it is not supposed to be a serious person. He looks at the ketchup with an eye that expects it to return inside the packet and is glad to feel foolish for the expectation. He eats a bite and sets the sandwich down, and the bite uneats itself in the sense that the corner comes back together, not the sense that his mouth gives it up. He does not take a second bite for a minute. He watches the little spice specks swim under the layer of something he's just done to himself, and then he decides to act like a man whose imagination needs a bit. He eats the rest, and the rest stays eaten. He says this out loud: "I'm not going to be the kind of person who takes away his own lunch." He laughs because he knows this sentence is untrue in the broad sense. He has taken away plenty from himself, and still is a sentence a man might need when other sentences are slippery. At one, the county puts another advisory out, and he is the person the motel owner trusts to read such things. It reads, "Water pressure irregularities possible as systems adjust. Do not be alarmed if fixtures behave unpredictably." He loves that phrase, behave unpredictably. It's a little quiet revolution. He says to the sink in the back when he runs the mop water and the water leaps twice and then drags its heels, "You are allowed to misbehave today." And the sink gurgles like aging pipes do and forgives him. He brings the caution sign out of the closet and sets it beside the mop bucket because slippery makes more sense when this yellow triangle is present. He appreciates a small ritual. The little black stick figure looks like he's been surprised by his own grace. At 3, Ro doesn't come back. He knows she wanted TT because he asked her to use her time the way a person who sends small money home learns to, which is not all on a shift. He fakes receipts for tax folks who will need them, someday writes a date and a check-in time and a checkout time that he knows will delete itself, because doing the action is the only way to get the result. And the result is to provide himself something to look at that isn't the vacancy sign. He feels in the envelope with the extra keys for the rooms that still use mechanical locks, that old sweet 10 and 12, because he likes the heft of them. They are not an erasing kind of item. You can throw a key into a lake and get back what you put there, which is nothing now but a hint to someone who swims there next summer that a man took himself too seriously for a minute. A man sits at the counter and asks if there's a sink somewhere to rinse a thermos. Will says sure. The man says he used to stop at the rest area, but nothing there has felt right for a week. How so? Will asks, because asking is the only way to distinguish stories. Like the signs are looking past me, the man says. Like the letters have tired of me. Never thought I'd say I injure a paper when I read it, but here we are. They smile at each other, and the man rinses his thermos and wipes it on his shirt the way men do when they want to feel original in their smallness. The man takes a room, sleeps, and wakes at a different hour a person might live in without warning. Will's shift continues to be the same length, which irritates him for reasons it shouldn't. At 4, he takes a moment to walk the strip of rooms and put an eye to the doors he knows should be propped open when the new air moves through. He loves the smell of a room that has let its monotony out, the little change that honest air from outside makes. He picks up a towel left in the breezeway by a person who thought it might dry in 2 days, while the air rehearsed its new tricks. The towel smells like a family thinks it doesn't. He folds it with the careful, mindless motion he learned 2 jobs ago when he wanted the women who ran the linen room to see that men can be taught. He lays it on the maid S-cart even though she isn't using it today because order makes us fall for ourselves less. In the evening, call it that because the sky darkens, not because of a clock, the sign for salt and sugar across the road glows and the inside of the windows is lit peach. He watches the woman with the braid wipe the counter. He can't see her face from here. He knows that if he goes in, she will call him by name and ask him if he thinks the problem is with satellites. He will say that the town doesn't operate with satellites. She will say, everything is a satellite to something. We just call them different names when we're keeping track. He doesn't go in. He feels a primness about it he doesn't enjoy and can't cure. A kid from out of town tries to buy a case of beer in the machine that used to hold laundry powder pods, and now, by miracle of a different vendor's attachment to novelty, holds a selection of local half-pints. The kid puts money in. The machine accepts it, then asks for it back by returning the bills and keeping their record. Will watches from the office. He considers stepping out, telling the kid to see if the diner will sell him a cold one. But new rules frown, and he hates drawing a map. He has no intention of walking. The kid swears courteously and gets in his car and leaves. He leaves in reverse too. Will hears the sound of that, and the sound his own mouth makes when he has stopped remembering he lives where he lives. He looks at his hands and sees the old cut on his knuckle from a winter he spent making shelves that never held anything. The cut lines itself into skin, even as he watches it soften in a way that used to mean the body is keeping its agreements. It fades and doesn't leave a scar. He turns his hand over and notes the small cluster of freckles on the heel below his thumb that his mother used to use to count to a number she invented and made up a rhyme for. The freckles are there, and then there are fewer. He blinks, and when he opens his eye, there are the right number again, because he has chosen that for himself. Somebody else can choose it back if they wish, he thinks, and doesn't like that he uses the plural for what is probably a mechanical job. The second night, he sleeps on the couch in the office because sleeping near trouble feels like being adult. The clock that positions itself above the map of the county finds an arrangement of digits that tells him nothing helpful. He stares at a pin he stuck in the county map for a question only he would ask. Where do people take themselves when they think they are moving somewhere the rest cannot follow? The pin sits in the short north road everyone calls by its old number. It isn't a map thing, it's a man thing. He's proud of the pin and hates himself for it a little. He hears the radio scanner that sits on the shelf back by the lost and found, a little thing the owner left on because it helps weekend evenings feel like a place that picks up the squawks and numbers of the sheriff's office and the volunteer firehouse and the dispatchers, who sound like they could manage the federal budget if asked to, come alive. It makes the quick bursts of static and then a voice too quiet. It makes another static and then clears, like it only learned how because someone new sat down in front of it. He hears 10:50, leaving 129. He hears no injuries. He hears please advise on time. He hears repeat time. The voice on the other end answers with a series of numbers and then laughs once like he didn't mean to be heard laughing, and then apologizes. The apology is too honest, and Will forgives him for it, because a man needs to know when another man has felt the floor change availability. He gets up and goes out into the lobby and tries the bell. It gives a little gasp, like the overloud ring a cheap metal has when it argues with itself about whether to be melodious. He thinks of ringing it until the ring sound equals the length of his fear, then stops himself because he knows that way lies bad neighbors. He uses the bathroom in the back, the one with the ding in the sink, where someone hit it with a cup 2 managers ago and nobody told the owner for fear the owner would decide to count cups, as if that will fix books. He holds the handle down because the toilet is a stubborn thing that places a high value on your patience. He likes it for that. He flushes. The water spins, then unspins, then decides it prefers to go out faster now. That's fine, he says, and when he washes his hands, he watches the little soap bubble sit in the crook of his thumb, then roll backward toward his fingers, as if the hand could convince it to be water again. He dries his hands on one of the thin towels he should have thrown away last month but didn't tea. The fibers catch on the little piece of nail that refuses to behave. He watches the catch undo itself. He decides someone else can have small miracles. There is something you might call science in all this, but he does not have the parts of the mind that make a person hold a tool and say, let us break a thing in controlled ways so we can praise it for its obedience. He thinks of Rose saying, "It is just the mirror that wants to perform, not the room." He thinks of the county's email saying devices. He thinks of how the cars on the highway come now in a rhythm that fails to satisfy. He thinks of a phrase he learned from television, arrow of time. He decides an arrow can become a loop and loop once in a while and call that learning. The third day the owner calls. The owner is named Len, and he ends the E with a long vowel like he refuses to be someone you step over. "You seeing this?" Len says, and Will says yes and mentions the county advisories and the water and the devices. "And the people?" Len asks. Will says nothing because he knows what he is being asked and might be next to last to be asked. Are the guests feeling cheated? And if so, will they write a review that punishes us? "They want what they want," Will says. "They're fine if we are fine." He chooses this and tries to believe it. "Can you print receipts?" Len asks, the sacrament. "I can print anything," Will says. "Will it hold?" "Not so far." They are silent. "Don't think about it too hard," Len says, and then making his voice a confession, "You start thinking about something too much, you pull yourself out of the part of the world we can name." "I will think about towels and taxes," Will says, because this is his way to say he likes to be told to keep his hands busy. "Good," Len says. "I'll pretend I didn't call." "You didn't," Will says. The line makes a small respectful click, like a finger on a guitar string. He holds his phone and it vibrates once because the weather app has an idea about rain it wants to share, and then vibrates again to apologize for telling him something he already can see with his head bent near a window. After noon, he goes room to room with a stack of printer paper and a polite pen, and asks people if they would like to check out, in the old meaning of leaving keys and telling him how they slept. He wants them to leave him lists, is what this is. He wants hand. People write their names and their comments, which are like weather reports from individual thunderstorms. Room 108. Fine, AC loud, man above me a chair. Room 104. Water odd but okay. Room 214. Thank you. I like the plant in front of the ice machine. The plant is plastic. He likes it too. He has never watered it. The paper looks like lists. He puts the paper under the glass of the counter like a boy makes a display under a rock for a frog and hopes the rock will keep doing what rocks do. He admits to himself that he hopes the glass has more being than a phone. He is weak in the presence of glass. At night, call it only because the people inside say it is, he lies on the couch and delays putting the blanket over his chest because he wants the feeling of being a person who doesn't to run from cold. He holds the latest printed county advisory up in front of his face and reads the words out loud to hear if the language takes a different shape when singed by breath. It reads as if someone a county away with a degree in saying certain truths without ruining anyone had worked extra to be the kind of friend you cannot ask for help at a real hour. We are experiencing ongoing temporal anomalies, a phrase which makes him angry because one of the words is for science and the other is for churches. He deletes the anger. We advise residents to avoid unnecessary travel and to monitor official channels for updates. He smiles at the word monitor because the monitors in his life have done him no favors this week. He sets the paper on his chest and closes his eyes and wakes after 3 minutes that his body miscounts as 2. Owens, a trucker from over the state line who has stopped here a dozen times this year and eats his scrambled eggs at salted sugar with a reverence like a man whose mother taught him what a blessing is, comes into the office at what the clock insists is 7:41 and asks if he can sit. Will gestures, pleased to see him. "You want coffee?" he says. Owens shakes his head. "Doc told me to stop," he says. He doesn't sound aggrieved. "I drink anyway if the day demands tribute." He looks at the clock and looks at Will and looks at the clock again. "You got 10 minutes?" he asks. Will nods because he has a lifetime's worth of 10 minutes. I got to Fayetteville by mistake, Owens says. He pauses to let the name settle. Will nods. Everyone gets to Fayetteville by mistake at least once. Took the ramp, didn't mean to, Owens says. The signs said where they said, and I found myself reading them like I was just learning letters. God's truth, I could not pick a lane. Then I kept looking in the mirror, and I saw myself not looking older but tired in reverse. Does that make sense? It does, Will says, because he needed a different mouth to say it. Like me, but less of what I've carried. I didn't like it. Made me feel like I shouldn't be trusted with money. I got off at the next. I counted my change at the top of the ramp, and it was more than I knew I had, and I did not want it. He laughs once. A man I am not is generous. Will smiles because he likes the man's voice, and because he keeps the kind of silence that lets other men fail without being asked to do it louder. Owens rubs his hands together, once the way a man makes a point without knuckles. You think it stops? He says. Will looks at the clock because his eyes know what to do. I think it ends, he says. Stopping and ending are not the same. Owens nods and looks down at his hat and tells it a joke with the brim that Will cannot hear, and then goes outside into a day that refuses to agree with the sun about when to show its face. On the fourth day, Will sees the first guest who has reverted to shadow. He is not proud of that language. He would never use it to anyone else. He uses it internally because he needs some word that doesn't pretend to describe a person, only how a person negotiates a hallway. The man in question is the one with the brown jacket, the one who liked his thermos clean. He steps out of 112 and turns toward the ice. Will watches the man put his hand into the slot like a person baptizing himself, and then the hand isn't to there, and then the man withdraws the arm with a little shake. His jacket looks fine. His hair has decided to take a different shape. His face, when he glances at the office door, has lost the lines men make when teeth meet in the anvil place. He looks like a man whose choice has been taken from inside his chest and moved out into a garage and shut behind a door he can tee open. Will stands up, takes 3 steps to the counter and puts both palms on it because he believes in old, honest work. You okay? He calls, words gentle. The man nods and half gestures toward his face. I must have slept, he says without joy. He goes into the room. The door closes before the slow easer catches it. Will listens to decide if he fears this man. He finds that he does not. He fears his own neck. He does not know what this means, and therefore thinks he might survive it this time through. He learns that he cannot photograph memory. He stands in the parking lot at the back where the trash bins sit, and the vegetable oil from the diner leaves a glisten that tells the rats more than it will tell him. He holds his phone to the door of the laundry room, where the small sticker he put up his first week on the job reads, "Check filters," in block letters he cut out and placed like a student for a teacher. He takes the picture and steps back and holds the phone. The letters are light, they do not register. The photograph reads CHCERS. He takes a second, he gets CHRS. He puts the phone in his pocket and says, "Fine." He can remember without help. He opens the dryer. The inside is a drum that holds the only sound in his life that makes him drift to sleep the way a person did before illusions got so cheap. Clothes knocking against metal with intent. He puts his head inside the drum and breathes in the smell that climbs from the sheets when you catch them halfway in a fold. He calls that smell caution to himself like a joke, and then removes his head because he is not interested in being statistic zoomed. By the 5th day, the town posts men with square blocks of orange at the foot of Ridge Street where it meets the highway. The blocks tell the Monday drivers who want the road to know detour. The detour points back into town in a circle that makes people laugh without humor. Will stands by his little sign, the one that says parking for guests, and looks at the crew like he wants to use his mouth to make them feel less alone. One of them sees him and tips his head in the second brother greeting men use when they can admit to needing to be seen. "You got trash pickup still?" the man asks. "Twice more this week if the men remember me," Will says. The man grins. "They won't," he says, not unkindly. "We seem to forget things back on their curb with a pace that eases my conscience." Then the man's radio barks, and he listens with a face that says the voice is familiar and the words are wearing a strange hat. He shrugs. He continues to place the plastic with the accuracy of a mason and the arrogance of a child, because this is the only way men can be paid for knowing how to hold 8 pounds without dropping them. He stops eating dinner at the same time, because the diner S sign glows, and then doesn't T, and then glows again, and the part of his mouth that believes is wearing thin. He eats when his stomach asks. It asks in a different voice. He refuses apples because apples do not want him just now, and he leaves them on the counter to crawl backward towards some earlier shape you defined on a tree if you were poor and a bird. He heats soup and watches it form skin and then unskin, and then skin as if playing a joke he wants to attribute to factory timing, not to a thing with power. He places the spoon in the sink and goes back in 10 minutes and it's dry. He refuses to grant that miracle the weight it wants. He picks it up and washes it because skill should be practiced. There is a woman he has tried not to think about, because thinking about her means becoming the man he isn't at a time when he is trying very hard to hold the man he is. She is Clara, which feels like a made-up name, and she ate pie at Salt and Sugar, the way a person eats alone and expects to be seen. He liked the way she asked for water, in the same voice she asked for the check, and he hated the way she looked at the door first when she picked anything up. He wanted to push a chair back for her, which is to say, he wanted to break his habits on purpose. He sees her that afternoon crossing the parking lot with her head down like she wants to sneak up on herself. He puts his hand on the counter to keep it where it belongs and waits. She stands on the other side of the glass and looks in, and he realizes she can see him well because of the reflection. He moves to the door and holds it open the way he always had trouble not overselling. "Hi," she says. He likes the weight of that. "Hi," he says. She looks past him at the map and the clock. "You open?" she asks. "If you are," he says. She smiles politely. "Do you have 8 minutes?" she asks. "I have any number you want," he says. They both know the joke isn't different enough to be charming, but it doesn't hurt. She steps in. Her hair smells like lungs. People treat hair and lungs like enemies. He disagrees. "You look fine," she says, and then laughs once. "I mean, you look like a person who slept outside last night and the air was kind. You look like you know how to leave a room when you want to," he says. They stand in the small space as if delicate furniture will embarrass them and they mustn't bump anything. "What brings you here?" he asks, because a man is supposed to ask a version of that sentence to a woman who has come to his place. "My mother's on the river," she says. "I thought you would know how to say the sentence I mean." He does. He does not want to say it. "She lost her place," he says, and has to swallow before the second clause will put on its shoes. The house watched her leave. She nods. She looks at his hand, which now grips the counter like boys do when the horse lifts a little. "Do you think this stops?" she asks. "I think something happens afterward," he says. "That's not an answer," she says. "No," he says, and looks at her like he wants to bring the good chair out for a person who has never been rewarded for wanting it. She nods once more and thanks him properly and leaves. As she goes, she forgets to pull the door closed, and then the door eases the last 6 inches slowly, which is the kind of politeness he aches over. He looks at the clock, and it says a thing he has never lived inside, and he wants very much to count to a number he can name. The 5th night, the motel enters a kind of kilter. The phone rings with the sound it had in 1992, between the 2nd and 3rd ring, when people used to let it ring more often. He picks up. The voice on the other end, breathing too close, says the room smells like bleach, and he says he can fix it. And the voice says they re-leaving anyway, and he says the words every person in work like his learns to say in the tone that one, to make it worse. I understand. He hangs up and looks at the bell, and the bell looks back like a cat looks at a person who is wrong. He hears the small chain in himself that keeps his common decency and his rage tied together shift a link. He takes the bell and sets it under the counter because he loves it too much to ask it to keep making noises he doesn't need. That is when the clocks actually stop. You'd think they'd have the decency to do it in a quiet hour. It is at 6:03 by the one above the county map, which he knows because he was looking at it. It goes 6:02, 6:01, 6:0, then blank, then, if you like magic, this part's for you. Like a water stain drying in time lapse, the whole face loses its digits and goes into itself. He does not say, huh. He thought he would say, huh. He feels the same a man feels when a semi-trailer passes, shaking more than air. Not fear, exactly. And when he looks at his wristwatch, it has decided to be a hand with 3 fingers, and none of them points in a way that satisfies anyone. He takes the watch off and sets it face down on the counter and tells it not to take its job too seriously. Without talk things telling him the proper tempo, he picks tasks that believe in themselves. He makes a list by hand for housekeeping that Ro won't read. But that doesn't mean she hasn't earned it. Strip 106, restock coffee 110, check hinge 212. He writes slow, big letters. He rests the pen. He empties the trash, and the trash looks like it always does. He opens the back door and brings the big can down the little concrete ramp. The wheels make the noise they make over that third crack, like the crack is doing its job privately. He breathes the air by the dumpster, and it smells like what it smells like, and he thinks inside his ribcage, there is a place where no matter can be reversed if it has become a part of him. The 7th day, give or take, because he has gone from number to noticing, he wakes on the office couch to the sound of someone flipping receipts. He sits up with his mouth so dry, his throat thinks about being an instrument and then declines. A person with Ro's patience sits at the counter. It is Ro. Her hair is bunched under a cap, and she wears a sweatshirt that has the logo of a basketball team he has never seen anyone wear in this town. She has a stack of the paid slips he stamps to feel like he is not lying to a man. She looks up. "Hey," she says, with that unfussy straightness that makes him think she will move furniture in a flood while other people admire the color of the water. "You get your hand around it?" she asks. "Keep losing my grip," he says. She nods. "I went to see Mrs. Tipp," she says. "She had her stories in the wrong order for a bit, but the endings were fine. I held her hand until they came back." "They did," he says, almost a question. "Enough," she says. "You?" He thinks. He thinks of the way the time undoes his face in the glass. He thinks of the advisory telling him water behaves. He thinks of the bell under the counter. "I have been just enough," he says. She looks at him. "That's all you ever had to be," she says. Then, as if remembering she had hands, she lifts the paid slips and sets them neatly, and then she crosses the room and taps the face of the county on the wall once with a knuckle. "We have always been wrong about maps," she says, as if she's telling him the secret of a family recipe. He wants to ask her what she means. He doesn't. He realizes he doesn't because he is afraid of understanding. He lets it move across his jaw like a cold spoon. By evening, the vacancy sign is black. It does not glow backwards or otherwise. The day is shutting itself down in honor of his lack of stamina. He makes himself go up to his room. He stands at the window and watches the highway. He doesn't typically allow himself this stale pleasure. Now he takes it. The traffic lights at Ridge Street change. The sequence is wrong. Then it is right. A car slows even though it has the right, because decent people slow because they fear doing harm. He puts a hand on his face the way men do when they want their feelings to move somewhere else and come back later as something different. The reflection shows him as upright, a fraction less worn, a fraction more like photographs show you when you avoid direct light. He resents this. He resents that absence is dressed up as care for him. He whispers, without trying to be dramatic, "No, thank you." He means it. He steps away and his own shadow on the rug moves with him, and he notes that the shadow is not reversed. He takes this as a cheap kindness from the room and decides not to praise it. He sits on the bed and puts his palms on his thighs and decides he will not lie to himself about a thing most men lie to themselves about until the end, when it hurts to quit. He has not been the person he was supposed to be. The bed springs give a little polite sound like seatbelts brushing. He keeps his mouth closed. This is unusual for him when alone. He is a talker under his breath. He breathes. He hears the fridge. He hears it hum. He hears the hum lower, then recapture the note it prefers. He hears his own heart like the bad neighbor playing decent music too much. He looks at the clock on the nightstand. No numbers glow. The face theme of green waits. He places one cool palm on the top of the clock as if he can grant permission. He feels nothing give. He waits. Some part of the knot systems may be leading him towards something called a zero. He does not like the sound of that, and he cannot stop moving toward it because he is not that powerful. He says the names of 3 people who would have missed him if he had left town last year when he wanted to. He says them in their own syllables, not the versions he wrote on envelopes. He breathes between them. He stands. In the office later, he finds he has written a note he doesn't remember writing. It is in his hand. It is not his language. It says, "Inventory clarity." He laughs in the worst way and then stops. He makes an inventory the way a man with a shed makes one when the person he lives with gets tired of finding bent nails with her feet. Bell, old keys, receipts, map little scissors, tape the drawer magnets that never have a reason to be a jar of peanuts from 3 winters ago when a sales rep thought he wanted to be smiled at. He lifts the jar and the peanuts inside look like they have waited well. The oil they release in a neat ring around the glass is within modesty's bounds. He opens the jar. The smell that lifts up forgives him for his neglect. He eats 3 in a row, and 2 of them crack like the good ones do. The jar label reads a date that sits wrong by any measure. He twists the lid back on, says, "You'll be fine until I make up my mind," and places the jar where he can see it to prove one thing at least is clear. The last day starts with light in a shape that makes his mouth taste metal. The county puts one last advisory out that has used up the words he taught themselves to trust. Avoid temporary system. It says simply, "Stay home. We will contact you when normal operations resume." He looks at normal and feels a little pity. He thinks of the home this place has been. He thinks of the bed upstairs that he doesn't know how to sleep in again after this week. He thinks of the chair in the office where he placed his body and boasted to the air that he has the decency to be tired. He thinks of Rowe and Owens and the woman with her hair like lung. He thinks of the brown jacket and the doily around the mouth of an old person, S-glass. He puts his hand on the counter. He leans. He asks the bell a question without ringing it. The bell doesn't answer. A family pulls in with a horse trailer whose horse is not in it. The father gets out and does the dance with his shorts pockets men do when they are about to pretend to be calm. The mother stays in the car. The teenage daughter looks at Will and looks at the sign. Will walks out to them because the door release sticks and because he wants to stand where air does not belong to the room. "Are you open?" the father asks. He looks at their faces. He finds he cannot divide them into impolite or polite or whatever other categories he very rarely allows himself to use. "Yes," he says, and says the next thing, even though it is not a talk a man who runs a motel is supposed to give anyone with a wallet. "But if it is all the same to you..." You might not want to stay." The man looks at him as if he spoke a language he expects to hear in a bureaucracy office, not a driveway. "Why is that?" he asks, because a man pays and wants a reason to be thanked. Will gestures at the clock inside and shrugs because the day is not his. The man nods. The teenage girl says, "I like weird things," and the mother smiles because her daughter is both like her and not, and you love that about daughters. "You can stay," Will says. "You should know you might be erased." He's sorry he says it that way. He cannot propose a gentler term that will keep its meaning. The mother looks at the daughter. "We can find somewhere else," the mother says, in a tone he understands as love. The father says, "We'll manage." The girl says, "I want to see it." Will bows his head a degree, like a man accepting a decision someone else will help him carry. He gives them a room. They spend 2 hours inside with the door open. He hears the laugh that an adolescent has when they try on new sizes. He hears it become a sound he remembers hearing as a boy. He hears it not at all. They leave. The father nods to him, an honest, tired, better-than-nothing nod. The mother touches the girl's shoulder. The girl looks wide. They pull out. The horse trailer rattles once politely and is gone. He doesn't know when it is. The vacancy sign is dark and he likes it. The bell keeps its own counsel. The county map stares like a man trying to learn how to watch his own heartbeat without interfering with it. The phone sits and isn't stupid. He goes upstairs. He remembers to lock the door and then unlocks it and decides he would like to meet the day properly. He stands by the window without looking. Then he looks. The sky does the thing where it looks like it wants to be certain. He thinks of the word 0 and decides to be kind to it. It was made to count nothing, not him. He sits on the bed, but not fully. The way a person sits on an exam table to tell a doctor both the truth and something he wants to be true. He takes the nightstand clock in his hands and sets it on his thighs so it can be a more comfortable tyrant. He says his name in full to himself in the tone you use when a very small child has tripped and needs you to tell them if this counts as a cry. He says the street he grew up on. He says the combination of numbers in his head that is the license plate from a truck his father loved, not for how long he owned it, but for the feel the wheel impressed on afternoons with grit. He says the birthdays he can think of. He says 3 phone numbers that no longer belong to anyone. He smiles when he says 1. He speaks the names of the 2 men he has wronged in dumb ways that could have been better. He says his mother's first name. He says her last. He says the name of the dog he buried. He says the room numbers he has a relationship with. He says the 3 words he thinks mean something when he says them slow. He runs out of saying. He waits. The clock's face lights for him finally. It does the digits with the same respect for their shape it always has. It finds a number it always brings him at the worst hour and then moves back to the number before and then to 1 before that. It is not quite a countdown, not quite an erasing. It is more like a tray sliding in on a runner. He feels the weight of an unarguable. He breathes in. He breathes out. The numbers keep working at their particular job. He holds the clock quiet, as if he can make it not rattle like a thing on a shelf during distant thunder. He lets it become the only light in the room. He feels his face become something smoother and unhappier. He watches his own hands grow less the way hands become less, not younger, just less something. He closes his eyes. He opens them. He looks at the window. He sees himself in it. He does not look familiar to himself in a way that is not alarming. It is the feeling of seeing a person you once fought beside and not finding the scar. He is not scared. He is not anything much. He sets the clock down and it keeps being. He lies back and places his left arm over his eyes because it is tender to shade places. He enacts a small mercy. He thinks of Roe tapping the county, He thinks of Owens counting his chain. He thinks of the braid woman telling him everything's a satellite. He thinks of a set of stairs that move a body upward by the agreement of the leg, not the promise of a number. He thinks the word door not as an escape, only as a way to move from one story to another when it is time. He breathes once more and he says to nobody who wants it, "Inventory complete." He hears the compressor of the fridge click. He hears it again, then again, but each repetition is less a sound and more a suggestion. The clock face emits its soft green and then loses interest in brightness. It drops the number a last time to nothing, not a dramatic black. The green simply decides it has nothing to do and gets some rest. Will watches it and isn't angry. He puts his finger on the top of the plastic, not pressing, only giving what he has. He would like to call this peace. He refuses to be that lazy. He lets it be the smaller thing. He closes his eyes, he opens them. The window shows an empty grey that might be morning or might be the idea of it. The apartment hums, the deep hum of a building that has been told it can finish its job now without the extra theatre. He waits a beat and he doesn't feel himself get lighter and he doesn't feel himself leave. He feels something else. A tiny weight inside his chest that held his day steady lift ever so little and click into a different groove. In that change, there is no pain. There is the mild sadness a man feels when he turns a key less slowly than he meant to, because he knows the lock will last longer if you are gentle, and he forgot to be, and now the lock is his, but also not. Downstairs at the counter, the bell sits in the dark under the till ring, withheld neither a greeting nor a warning. Ready and not needed, the little brass mouth of it open to a room that will require less of it from now on. Outside, the vacancy sign S light holds nothing, and the highway goes about its business with all the confidence of the unexamined. People go in and out of rooms because a day asks this of them. They use sinks that misbehave, and they accept the water as it comes. The county S advisory banner remains pinned on the diner bulletin board, and somebody has written in Sharpie at the bottom in a tenuous hand, "Okay." The motel sits and waits, unoffended. Anyone looking in the glass of the office after midnight will see only their own outline trying to make itself a man behind the counter. And if a face comes to the glass looking for something, salt, sugar, a key, a name, the glass will be a faithful glass, making no promises and reflecting what it owes. If they cup their hands to it and peer and ask, "Who's there?" the answer will be what the room has wanted to say all along, in that polite, useful tone he liked better than he let on. Someone was. If this story lands with you, please like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who enjoys quiet, literary horror. Comments are open. Tell me your favorite image or line.